Cashflow Diary Podcast, episode 144.
Welcome to yet another exciting episode of the Cashflow Diary Podcast, the podcast that teaches you insider tips, tactics, and strategies for creating leverage streams of cash flow into your life. Learn from top-performing entrepreneurs, business owners, investors, and thought leaders from across the globe as they share their secrets to success. Like what you learn on this and other Cashflow Diary podcast episodes? Go to learninvestingnow.com and sign up to receive powerful tips and information that will help you succeed as an entrepreneur and investor. Now, here's your host, investor, entrepreneur, business owner, educator, speaker, author, and master facilitator of Robert Kiyosaki's cash flow game, Jay Massey.
Hey guys, figured I'd give you a little bit of a special episode, if you will. I know this is not normally a day in which you're used to hearing from us, but today's special and you don't even know it yet, but I definitely want to share that with you. Really quickly though, I want you to grab a pen, write this down because you're going to want to go to this particular website. We've got a new tool for everybody, especially if you are out there looking to raise capital or find investors, etc. There's a tool that I developed. We call it the Profit Analysis Quadrant. People ask, how do you raise capital on the back of a napkin? How can you do deals everywhere? If that's something that you are interested in for your business and or real estate, you're going to want to go over to cashflowdiary.com/secret money tool. Again, that's cashflowdiary.com/secret money tool. And this particular episode is going to just share with you why that's important and why is today so special. Specifically, I was asked a question, and I'm going to get to that in just a second. Many of you may not realize, you may not know, why would you, especially if you haven't listened to episode number 1, that today happens to be the 7-year anniversary of the day that our primary residence went to foreclosure. So as a recap, just to give you an understanding, for those you may not know the story, when my wife and I first, got started in real estate, we had previously experienced a miscarriage. And for all of you who have ever been through that, you understand what that means. So when we were pregnant again, we were very excited about it. And the challenge was this time, she developed a condition known as hyperemesis. And again, if you don't know what that is, it simply means that she could not eat or drink while pregnant, period. I took lots of medications and all these other things. I call it an oil, lube, and filter change because she was constantly hooked up to machines and blood this and IVs that, and it was absolutely nuts trying to figure it out. Needless to say, if you've ever had to support a loved one in the hospital in any way, shape, or form, you know that that's something of a stressful situation for you. And I responded by saying, going to play some volleyball because I thought that was going to help me blow off some steam. And many of you know, especially if you've met me in person, I'm a little taller than the average person, and I grew up playing basketball, and which means I didn't really have a whole lot of volleyball experience. However, there's lots of movement that is the same. You got jumping, right? I can dunk a basketball, so I'm like, well, surely I can jump and spike a volleyball, right? How hard could it really be? Well, interestingly enough, jumped just fine. However, landing was a challenge, and I landed on a guy's head and punctured my lung. That began just a cascading set of events. That cascading set of events meant I could not walk and talk simultaneously without fainting. My wife was unable to eat or drink. We were quite the pair. It got to the point to where we were making decisions like electricity or food. And that was not exactly something that was enjoyable, to say the least. So what happened is if you're making those types of decisions, guess what you're not doing? You're not too concerned about paying certain bills. And more importantly, you end up with a credit score in the area of 398 as we had. And that was a 3, 9, and an 8. I did not get those numbers in the wrong order in any way, shape, or form. And a friend says, hey, you should become a real estate investor, which, isn't that the solution you would come up with? So after listening and finding out some additional information, we decide to plunge in. Hey, can't get any worse, right? Well, I've learned not to say that. At the end of the day, what happens is, as it says in Think and Grow Rich, you've got to have some specialized knowledge in some area to begin to dig yourself out of whatever you're in. And that's exactly what we started doing. We started digging ourselves out of the situation with specialized knowledge in real estate, specifically wholesaling, and subject to and all kinds of creative acquisition techniques that allowed us to buy and sell properties really, really quickly using none of our own money and credit. And shortly thereafter, learning, we actually got our first deal under contract. So you got to understand, it was the day before Valentine's Day. 12 days later, we start learning about real estate investing in live format classrooms and networking events, etc. And then a few months, 4 months after that, we get our first transaction and actually close it. And now we're owning a property, squatting a bank-owned property, collecting rent and raising capital for rehabs and running contractors and property managers. It was pretty interesting change of events. And that's a situation that launched, lots of mental mindset shifts. I mean, I know 3 weeks after we did that, we ended up doing 11 transactions in a week. And by the end of the first 6 months, we had done nearly 24 transactions, created a 6-figure income. It was like, wow, that stuff on the commercials, that's actually possible in some way, shape, or form. And we're the people who actually did it. Wow, this is amazing. What else can we do? And that thought process just got, took us to many different places. What else could we do? So, that's a good question to ask yourself. If you've ever had success in any area, what else could you do? And interestingly enough, there was a question that I was asked today. I was being interviewed on a completely different podcast, and the gentleman asked me a question, and then earlier this week, a friend of mine suggested I start asking a particular question of everybody. And I'm just like, they both had a really good question. It's kind of the same question, just asked from two different viewpoints. My friend just said, what is the source of your success? That's the question he wants me to start asking on all of the episodes. And I'm just sitting here thinking that's probably a really, really good one. I'm sure it would help me as well as you guys as we continue to go out there and learn more, right? And the question I was asked today is, so what changed? What turned it around? And I was like, it's kind of the same question, like I said, just from two different viewpoints. And at the end of the day, I think it's important to understand what changed. I mean, if you're swimming in frustration and the world is caving around you and swirling, how do you gain the focus and ability to go out there and do the things that you know that you should be doing and making that happen? That's part of what obviously had to change. And it's not like you don't know that, but where do you get your strength from to do those things? And what are those skill sets that you got to master in order to make that happen? So those are the things that I want to introduce and talk to you about today and just kind of share with you. I know you, like I said, you weren't expecting another episode this week, but I didn't think you'd mind anyway. So I figured, hey, why not? And again, I normally don't do these types of things, or at least share this type of information in this such a direct format, but I think it's appropriate that you guys understand. Many of us draw our strength from many different places, and for myself and my wife, we definitely rely on the Bible for a lot of things. I mean, as many of you have probably inferred or guessed many, many times, we read it often, we go to church, we do those things, we pray a ton. All of those things are part of our daily regimen that help us stay focused and straight and grounded, and when we're with our small groups and D groups and all the other things that we do to go out there to advance the Lord's mission. Now, I probably just lost some of you, but oh well. At the end of the day, you need to know where certain things can be gathered from, because most of us aren't prepared when life hits us. And fortunately, we had that resource. And I'm going to do something that I've not done on the podcast before. I'm just going to share 3 particular verses that helped me and still help me to this day to continue to move forward, that I believe will begin to help you as well. One of them, if you're like me in any way, shape, or form, and this may sound odd, but I doubt nearly everything. Initially, it's like I doubt it. It's like, that's not going to happen. This won't work, and blah 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 blah. And here's why. And you learn to train your mind in different ways, so that you have the ability to have different results than what you may have been producing. So my natural inclination is not to believe what it says in Proverbs 14:23, that all hard work brings a profit, but mere talk leads only to poverty. The key words here are all, right? So if you're feeling like you're working hard, the good news is all of it brings a profit. And that's in a monetary sense, as it's meant in the original meaning. And that, I think, is something that's important to understand. Sometimes you need to hear that from someone else. And then the next one is hyper popular, and I'm sure many of you already know it when I say Jeremiah 29:11, and just understanding that as it's written, it just simply says, I know the plans I have for you, plans to give you hope and a future. And again, if you're anything like me, you struggle with the idea of not knowing. How's this going to turn out? What's going to happen? These are ideas or thoughts that run through your head that drive you nuts and batty, and you do your best to try to figure it out before it actually happens, so you can kind of feel calm about it. And guys, we're living way too much into the future. And that's part of the things that can plague your ability to actually take the action that you need. I mean, now o'clock, this is the time that you can actually act in. I cannot act in the future. I cannot act in the past. I only have right now to make a decision and do what I hope to be the best and rightest, I don't even know if that's a word, most right or correct thing, so that I can go out there and make these things happen. Interestingly enough, it's that particular verse is being spoken directly to those that are listening. I know the plans I have for you, and the I is, of course, the Almighty. And the thing to understand with that is, if you trust the source or the person who's in control of things, it's okay that they know the plans that they have for you. And if you trust them, then it's okay. You can relax. You can breathe, and it's no big deal, even though it feels occasionally like, hey, we're going off a cliff here. But no, I know the plans I have for you. And the challenge with that is that we don't know, and we start asking for little hints. And well, the good news is that we have them. Those little hints are simply, it's planned to give you hope in a future. That doesn't sound bad to me. The challenge is that we usually are asking for a little bit more detail than just that. And then the third one is, again, significantly popular, because as soon as I say it, those of you familiar with it, you'll know, you're like, oh yeah, I totally get you, Jay, on that one too. And it's just simply Romans 8:28, because we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. Not our purpose, keywords there, but it's all things. Again, that word all, just like all hard work in all things, even though your current reality is probably not something that you're excited about, or even if it is, great. Either way it goes, we know that in all things, God worked for the good, not the bad, the good of those who love him. Here's a quick example of things like that. Have you ever been through something that you were like, man, this is hard, this is difficult, but yet on the other end of that something, you were better for it? You didn't necessarily like going through it. And, maybe after you stopped trying to go around it or avoid it or under it or what have you, you ended up in a situation where you're like, man, I'm stronger, I'm bigger, I'm better, I'm badder, right? Those are the things that we begin to talk about. See, in all things. And that's the foundation in such a very, very strong way. And of course, there are many, many others, especially when you start thinking about the parable of the talents. And it's just simply an admonition to go out there and take what you have, not focused on what you don't have, but take what you do have and double it. no matter what it is, no matter how small it is. Take whatever you've got and work with that and make something of it. That is the call of the hour for each and every one of us in so many ways. With all that being said, one of the things, I've got two things that I wanted to talk about now is one is the 8-step plan for entering a new arena and succeeding, because that's basically what we had to do, right? We had to develop a plan for entering a new arena and succeeding. And then I'm going to share with you what I believe to be the 3 most important skills, because if I'm going to answer the question, what changed and turned it around? Well, it would make sense to give you some practicals to go along with that. So I've said this before, especially for those of you who are, in our membership, the where we talk about a number of these concepts and things as we help you, with your portfolios of buy and hold and apartment buildings and wholesaling and all that other stuff. That you're on this path to becoming. That's for those of you who have participated in the video series, Cash Flow Foundation. That particular video is there. That talks about the path to becoming. And it's really an 8-step plan for entering a new arena and succeeding. So I want to give you the 8 steps and talk a little bit about each one of them. And you can glean from there what it is that you might need to do so that you can go experience something bigger, better, badder than what you may be experiencing today. And even if things are going great, you can still use this to make things even better. So the first step in that entire process is just desire. And by desire, I simply mean you gotta want to, not a have to. It's gotta be a want to, all right? You gotta want to so bad, because want is so much better, more empowering than a have to, but you gotta want it. It's the one step that no one can give you. No one can implant desire into your head. You must actually just go, period. You gotta want to. You gotta want to more than you want to watch TV. You gotta want to you gotta give up. And this is where many of us must begin to learn the definition of the word sacrifice. Sacrifice is simply giving up something that you currently perceive as good for something that you believe to be better. And that desire has to be strong enough to do that. What's going to get you to, pick up a book and turn off the TV? What's going to get you to listen to the next episode of this podcast? I don't know, but it's got to be there. Maybe this is the first time you're listening and you've got to develop a new habit of listening to podcasts and information that's going to keep you inspired, not just motivated, to move forward. And it starts with desire. Number 2 is time. It's the one non-renewable asset. All of us have it. It's your most valuable one. So the question and challenge is what are you doing with it? Because many people say, I want to become an investor. And I say to each and every one of you listening, you already are. The challenge is, what kind of return have you been earning on your time? And I'm not talking about just your job here, okay? But that is definitely one of the places to think about it. But every time you're listening to a podcast episode, is that particular podcast host giving you more in use value than they take from you in cash value? And we have a relatively long format show, right? So we've got to figure out a way to give you many we've got a few minutes of your time to figure out how to give you lots of use value so that you want to come back, so that you might dare leave a review. You might dare help us get the information out there so that you can be a part of the mission. And that's one of the greatest things that you can do, is to be a part of the mission, to create more entrepreneurs who can go out there and provide jobs and clean, safe, affordable housing. That's what you do when you leave a review. You actually participate in the mission in that way. And those are the thing is what are you doing with that most precious and non-renewable asset that you have, your time? See, when you begin to look at it that way, it becomes a completely different equation when you start looking at TV or reading a newspaper or anything that doesn't help you move towards the goals that you currently have set for yourself. Because then the next step is talents and skills. You've got to gain new talents and skills, which typically is where most of us are. And that's when you start to begin to seek out new information so that you have the ability to go out there and become a different person than you are today. It's through talent and skills. And we're going to talk about one of those number one skills that I believe that you need to have. Actually, we're going to talk about three of them. And with the combination of the three, you can go build any particular business you want or for any particular cause. I don't really care, but the combination of these three make you an unstoppable force if you're willing to submit to the process of learning them. And for, you've heard about the 4 levels of learning for those of you that have participated before. After you begin to develop those new talents and skills, the interesting thing is it makes you more useful to many different people. And as you become more useful to others, you enter into new relationships. And those new relationships are where you begin to grow even faster and networks begin to open for you in ways that you may never have been able to understand before. And it's one of those challenging pieces, especially if you're introverted or you have more introverted tendencies like I do. You know that one of the things you need is people to help you on this mission and this team, but it takes you forever to build relationships. And it's one of the things that a lot of our members and again, customers have received is we create, you can't just, you have to be a customer to get this. It's our bonus networking guide that teaches a lot of our accelerated relationship building techniques to help people be able to develop relationships in minutes and in these, some of the strangest of places so that you can go out there and begin to build those databases in that network. And all of these things, it takes time, but it can be done. See, the challenge is that people want, the microwave version, and we do our best to tell you what that looks like and what that is. I just want to be very clear about how you're going to get there and be consistent with it in so many different ways. So what's the next step? Okay, step number 4 is all about the relationships. What do I have to do after that? Well, you have to gain credibility. Period. Credit and credibility. That becomes the next most important piece of the puzzle. See, as you are out there introducing yourself to the world, you're influencing people, rightly or wrongly, whether you're doing it intentionally or not, you're influencing people and in terms of how you show up and what you're doing or not doing and how you serve or not serve. All these little things make a difference and help you gain credit and credibility with individuals in a various different ways. Now, just because you met me today doesn't mean that you get to use or leverage that credit or credibility 100%. You must do something else. First, you must provide some value. So we'll get to that. But it's that very credit and credibility that you need to build over time so that you can get to the next step, because this is where most people want to start. Most people want to start straight right at cash. This is where you begin to have cash. For example, once a brand name begins to build credit or credibility with you, the customer, what ends up happening is that then you're willing to give them money. Most people want to start straight there. There's like, hey, how can I get straight to more money? Well, okay. And that's really where people want to begin. However, there are so many more steps that happen before that. And once you begin to understand how to find a customer and do those types of things repeatedly, you got the next thing, which becomes cash flow. How can I then develop systems that allow this process to continually work with or without me such that I receive cash flow, probably begin to create some jobs. And in this case, clean, safe, affordable housing, those types of things. But that's step number 7. And that becomes the next most important thing for you to do so that you can get to step number 8. And step number 8 is simply significance. I think many of us want to make sure that we leave the world to be a better place than we found it. We want to have positive interactions. Now, that doesn't mean every interaction you're going to have on your journey is going to be positive. It doesn't mean that every person that you talk to is going to have your best interest at heart. It doesn't mean that every relationship is either going to begin and or end harmoniously. Yeah, you may need to learn how to deal with takers because they're there. You may need to learn how to, figure out who should be on your team, who's really down for your mission and helping you make that happen. And the challenge is that as entrepreneurs, we are by default naturally optimistic. We have to be. We just have to be. And we have to learn how to temper that enthusiasm and optimism in an appropriate, wise way so that on the way to our journey or through our journey and on the way to the goals, we don't get overly sidetracked or downtrodden by all the negative things that can happen. I'm not saying they're going to. I'm just saying they're a real risk. Okay. And you just got to know that that's the process. So again, as a quick review, those 8 steps: desire, time, talent, skills. That's step 3, talent and skills. Number 4 is relationships. Number 5 is credit and credibility. Number 6 is cash, then cash flow, and then finally significance. But it all starts, remember, with that desire and how you're using your time. For most of us, it's figuring out how to use our time more intelligently, which begins to unlock the key to everything else. So what are these 3 most important skills? See, as you're on this path to becoming, on this journey, what are those 3 most important skills? More importantly, when used in combination, how you can go out there and literally dominate your area of influence. And here they are. The first one, if you make it past the next words that I say, that'll be awesome. And hopefully it doesn't scare you too bad, but it's the truth. You, I, all of us must learn how to become professional salespeople. Period. We must learn how to become professional salespeople, not amateurs, not wannabes, not kindas. We must become professional at it. We must understand what it is that we do. We must understand a very basic concept taught to me by Eric Lofholm. And if you can go back into the archives, you'll see the episode where he and I were talking about it, where sales equals service. And if I don't sell you something, I cannot serve you. I want to serve you. I really, really do. But if we don't have an equal exchange of value, we have an abusive relationship. And that's the problem. If I allow you to continually take from me in a way that I don't agree with, then that's, an abusive relationship. See, the podcast, I'm agreeing already. I know up front that we're going to do our best to provide value for you, each and every one person. That's what we're thinking about all the time. How can we provide more content of great value? And we know that, or at least strongly believe, that if we continue to provide great value, that we will be able to help you with goals and achievement and staying focused and on track. And at some point, when it's appropriate, you'll say, okay, I want to work with them in some way, shape, or form. And that's great. That's what we want when you feel it's appropriate. And that's why we're always striving to make each episode better than the last. So that if we ever ask, because we did this the other day inside the Facebook group, it was funny. I was like, so what's your favorite episode? And someone said, the last one I listened to. And they're serious. They're like, yes, everyone I'm listening to. I'm just like, oh yeah, that was great. That was better than the last one. I'm like, that's awesome. And I appreciate those comments. However, you and we must learn to sell. It's not optional. Okay. And I strongly recommend that you learn it because you can't, it's one of the most expensive things to try to outsource. And you got to understand and begin to break it down, the difference between sales as well as marketing and understanding those differences. You must learn this skill so that when push comes to shove, if it comes down to you, the entrepreneur, and you've got to keep the lights on, you know what to do to go out there to get a customer. You must do it. Otherwise, your passion, your mission, your vision, it may die. Number 2 is hyper important, especially for those of you who, again, may not like to talk a whole lot and you are like me, you seek out the first corner you can find. You must become a better communicator, period. Now, that doesn't mean you have to learn how to be a better orator. As you guys have probably figured out, I tend to slant towards lots of videos and lots of audio because it's easier for me than it is sitting down trying to write. Now, we do produce a ton of written content, right? However, We do that primarily because we know that some of you prefer to read it as opposed to listen to it. And some of you are like me, you're auditory learners, you prefer to hear it. And some of you, you're visual, so you want to see it. So we try to do it in all three modalities. And when we get a chance, we get our hands on you. When you let us, we'll get you into one of our mastermind groups so it can be more kinesthetic learning and actually going out there to make things happen. However, you must become a communicator of your idea, of your vision, of your mission, of what it is that you're trying to do to influence and change the world. Because if you don't learn how to effectively communicate what it is that you're trying to do, I can't join you. Even if I want to, I can't, because I don't understand what you're saying. And that's one of the things that has kept me focused on how we do our everything, is because many of you know, or maybe you don't, the podcast and this documentation process of this journey began as a way for me to make sure that my children had the ability to follow if they so desired, that they would know what they needed to do. And then a friend of mine said, "Hey, I bet you that adults would be interested in that information too." So, but I'm always thinking, I'm looking at my children now, and the youngest is currently 4. I'm like, how can I say these complicated things in such a way such that if he was 4, he could understand what daddy is trying to do? Now, I'm not saying you're 4 because you're clearly not. You got an iPhone or an Android device if you're listening on Stitcher or whatever. I'm just saying, I just want to make sure that it's clear. And when you can clearly communicate even high level concepts, you have a shot at helping so many people. Because as entrepreneurs, we know our business. We know it inside and out, and we can talk to the highest levels of the high. However, our customer, the person we're trying to serve, may not be there, and we need to meet them where they're at. So learning to communicate is key. As many of you know, one of the best resources that I've consistently recommended is to go to Toastmasters. They're everywhere. So I don't care where you're listening to me from. I'm almost even willing to bet that if you looked up in Antarctica at toastmasters.org, you probably would find at least one chapter. They are everywhere. So you've got no excuse. They're close to you. There's probably a meeting today. You can go look that up and begin to make that happen. See, that's part of how you invest your time differently. The third thing is related to what I was talking about at the beginning of the show, is simply learning how to raise capital. Because I don't care what your business is. I don't care how many real estate properties you have, or even how much money or credit you have right now. Same thing tends to happen for most people. At some point, you run out. You run out of your own resources. So understand, yes, when I say raising capital, we're primarily talking about, money or currency or, dollars, yen, euros, renminbi, whatever it is that you currently are using. However, you must learn the underlying skill set there isn't just about money. It's about learning how to access the resources of others, how to exchange something other than just cash in a very serious way in order to receive the benefits and skill sets of others that you need. By understanding how to raise capital, you can understand how to bring your team together and have large teams. Anybody can have a whole bunch of money and pay people a whole bunch of money. But how do you do it when you don't have a whole bunch of money? Because that's where most of us start. And that's where we started. See, I was given the gift of the accelerated process. If I just started in a position in which I couldn't use my own resources because they did not exist. So I had to learn from day one what some of you may have to learn later. And a number of you maybe you're Fannie and Freddie'd out and you can't buy any more real estate. And you're just like, man, I want to buy more deals, but I can't get another loan. And you're beholden to the bank system and you don't know how to get to free yourself from it. And that's a challenge. I mean, it really, really is. And because you can't see that, you just go, well, I can't expand. I can't do this. I can't do this. Some of you, maybe in your franchises or businesses, you would love to expand, but you don't know how to access more capital to do it. I mean, you probably have the right ratios and everything, but you're just like, no bank is going to lend me money, but you don't have a system and process in place to be able to begin that. And others of you, you're thinking, oh my gosh, I got to deal with investors. And you start going through this high level place that requires so like an MBA or something. And you're like, man, I don't know anybody like that. How on earth can I make something happen? And here's the thing. Many of you already know, but I didn't finish, college. I don't have an MBA, and so I've never really gone to business school, unless you call the business or the school of hard knocks. I've got many certificates of appreciation and participation from that school, that's for sure. And through that process, you've always heard, at least I've heard a lot, hey, you can do a deal on the back of a napkin. But I never had anyone to show me how. And people would always say that from stage, and it would just be irritating to me. And I had to develop, that's what we do as entrepreneurs, to develop our own resources and tools as we go. And what does that conversation look like? And what are the pieces of the deal, and who gets what, and how to make that happen? And then the challenge is that then you've got to communicate it to other people, right? You can't sell it if you can't communicate it to other people. You have no way of making it happen, and it gets so frustrating. Why won't they buy my deal? It's so great. That's what we end up feeling. And having gone through that more than once, and that feeling more than once, we developed a tool. We call it the profit analysis quadrant. That's the tool. That's the name of the tool. And it has helped, myself and many of us investors has raised literally millions of dollars. Many different countries. I've used it in Europe. I've used it in the US. I've shown people all over, and it can be adapted for every place that has some form of currency. And so long as you're dealing with people, it works once you understand the tool. And that's one of the things that you've got to always understand with your time. It's not just having access to a tool. Like if I gave you a high-end camera, that's wonderful. But if you don't know how to use it, it's just a paperweight. But it's an expert tool. It knows its job better than you do. And right now, for many of you, the how to raise capital and the profit analysis quadrant and the conversation around that and investors, you're sweating just listening to me. And I understand, but I can walk you through it. And that's the thing that I want to share with you, that I can walk you through it. We just put the finishing touches on this thing, and you now have the ability to have access to it. So I wanted to make sure that you had it, because if you want to know how to turn your situation around, what's going to change, that's what I wanted to share with you. And I wanted to create a way to make it easier for that to happen. So if you've listened this far, your next step is to move at the speed of instruction. And what does that mean this time? It means go over to cashflowdiary.com/secret money tool. Cashflowdiary.com/secret money tool. It's the same URL that I gave you at the beginning of this episode, because I want you to have the tools. I want you to have access to something, and it's not going to cost you a dime. Just go get it. And I will show you over a few video series how to use it. And literally, I'm going to use a real estate example in the videos, but it works if you want to do a music CD, if you got a franchise, if you got a new widget you want to make, whatever. And it's how you can literally draw your entire deal out on the back of a napkin, so that somebody you're sitting across knees to knees at the table with can go, yes or no, I'm in or I'm out. And it'll be very, very clear to them what they're getting, what you're doing. And at the end of the day, you have a shot at helping by providing more jobs, more clean, safe, affordable housing, and becoming a different person on your path to becoming. Well, as I said at the beginning, it's been 7 years. Let's see what the next 7 years holds. Until next time.